My name is Samantha, and at 32, I thought I knew everything about money as a financial advisor. What I failed to understand was how family could be your biggest financial liability. When my sister Kristen begged me to co-sign her $60,000 wedding loan, I never imagined she would text me, "Thanks for the gift, sis," and disappear. The devastation I felt seeing my credit score plummet was only matched by the satisfaction of watching her face when the bank called her directly. Before I tell you how my own sister stabbed me in the back, let me know where you're watching from and hit that like and subscribe button if family betrayal stories make your blood boil like mine. Growing up, I always knew my place in our family hierarchy. As the oldest daughter, responsibility was thrust upon me from an early age, while my sister Kristen, 10 years my junior, somehow escaped the burden of expectations. Our parents, Barbara and Gerald, were hard-working middle-class people who wanted the best for their daughters. But somehow the best looked different for each of us. For me, it meant maintaining straight A's, babysitting Kristen after school, and getting a part-time job at 16 to save for college. For Kristen, it meant dance lessons, cheerleading camps, and having her every whim indulged because she was just so special. I remember the Christmas when I was 17 and desperately wanted a laptop for college applications. I received a refurbished model that constantly froze, while Kristen, just 7 years old, got an expensive doll collection she had mentioned exactly once. "Samantha, you understand that your sister is still little," my mother would say. "You were always so mature for your age." That pattern continued through my college years. I attended the state university on a partial scholarship, working 20 hours a week at the campus bookstore to cover the rest. Meanwhile, my parents started a Kristen's Future fund that they contributed to religiously. When I asked if they had saved anything for my education, my father looked genuinely surprised. "But you always handled things so well on your own, Samantha," he said. "Kristen isn't as resourceful as you are." By the time I graduated with my finance degree, I had student loans but also a solid job offer at a respected financial advisory firm. I rented a tiny studio apartment, drove a used Honda, and ate ramen more often than I care to admit. But I was proud of myself. I had built something on my own. I was determined to be smart with money, especially after watching my parents' sometimes precarious finances. Kristen's life took a predictably different path. She dropped out of community college after one semester, declaring it boring. She cycled through retail jobs, quitting whenever a manager disrespected her by asking her to work weekends or holidays. She lived at home rent-free until she was 23, with our parents covering her cell phone bill, car insurance, and daily Starbucks habit. "She's finding herself," my mother would explain when I expressed concern about Kristen's lack of direction. "Not everyone knows what they want right away like you did." The irony wasn't lost on me when I became a financial advisor, specializing in helping young professionals avoid bad financial decisions. My clients respected my advice on budgeting, investing, and planning for major life expenses. Yet my own family saw my financial literacy as something to exploit rather than learn from. My apartment gradually upgraded from a studio to a comfortable one-bedroom in a safe neighborhood with a doorman. I wasn't living luxuriously, but I was secure. I had an emergency fund, retirement savings, and was on track to buy a condo within 5 years. My careful planning and modest lifestyle were deliberate choices that gave me peace of mind. Kristen, meanwhile, lived in a perpetual state of financial chaos. She would call me in tears about overdraft fees or maxed-out credit cards. Against my better judgment, I bailed her out a few times, always with the promise that this is the last time and I'm really going to get my act together now. That's when Jason entered the picture. He swept into Kristen's life with his charming smile and vague entrepreneurial ambitions. He always had a big deal in the works, though the specifics remained mysteriously unclear. He dressed expensively and drove a leased BMW he could barely afford. Red flags were practically shooting out of his ears, but Kristen was smitten. "He's going to be so successful, Sam," she gushed during one of our rare sister lunches. "He's talking to investors about his app idea. It's going to be like Uber, but for dog walkers." I nodded politely while mentally calculating the astronomical odds against such a venture succeeding. When I gently suggested that perhaps they should date longer before getting too serious, Kristen's face hardened. "You're just jealous because I found someone who supports my dreams," she snapped. "Not everyone wants to live like a boring accountant counting pennies." I let it go. Experience had taught me that Kristen would do exactly what she wanted regardless of my advice. Besides, maybe Jason would surprise me. Maybe his dog walking app would be the next billion-dollar startup, and they would live happily ever after in Silicon Valley. But as months passed, the picture became clearer. Jason lived in an apartment he could barely afford. His credit was abysmal from failed business ventures. He had temporarily moved in with Kristen after being evicted from his place. And yet, they continued spending like trust fund kids on vacation, designer clothes, expensive restaurants, weekend trips. When Kristen called to tell me they were engaged after just 8 months of dating, I forced enthusiasm into my voice and asked the date. "We haven't decided yet," she said. "But it's going to be epic. Jason says we only get married once, so we should do it right." I should have recognized those words as the first tremors of the earthquake that was about to demolish my financial future. But I was still operating under the delusion that even Kristen wouldn't expect me to fund her wedding. That was before I understood just how far my sister would go to have her perfect day, and just how blindly my parents would support her in getting it. The engagement party was my first glimpse into the financial nightmare that would become Kristen and Jason's wedding. My parents hosted it at an upscale restaurant downtown, with 50 guests enjoying an open bar and 4-course dinner. I arrived early to help set up and found my mother arranging elaborate floral centerpieces that I later learned cost nearly $2,000. "Mom," I whispered, helping her adjust a particularly top-heavy arrangement. "This seems excessive for an engagement party." She waved away my concern. "It's a special occasion, Samantha. Your sister only gets engaged once." I bit my tongue to avoid pointing out that statistically, given Jason's character and their relationship dynamics, that might not be true. Kristen floated through the party in a new designer dress, showing off her engagement ring to anyone who would look. The diamond was at least 2 carats. And I couldn't help wondering how Jason had paid for it. Later, I overheard him at the bar boasting to his friends about investing in crypto and how he was about to close a major deal. It was during dessert that Kristen clinked her glass and stood to make an announcement. "Jason and I have set a date," she beamed. "Next June, we'll be getting married at Sunset Cliffs Resort." The crowd erupted in cheers while I nearly choked on my cheesecake. Sunset Cliffs was one of the most expensive wedding venues in the state, famous for its oceanfront ceremony space and ballroom with floor-to-ceiling windows. Celebrities and tech moguls got married there, not retail associates and wannabe entrepreneurs. When the party wound down, I pulled Kristen aside. "That venue is beautiful, but it's also really expensive," I said carefully. "Have you and Jason worked out a budget?" Kristen's smile dimmed slightly. "We're figuring it out. Dad said he would help some." Some turned out to be $10,000, which wouldn't even cover the venue rental, let alone everything else. But Kristen seemed unconcerned, changing the subject to bridesmaid dresses and whether releasing doves would be too much. Over the next few months, Kristen's wedding plans grew increasingly extravagant. She sent me links to $5,000 wedding gowns, custom-designed invitations, and a honeymoon package to Bora Bora. Meanwhile, the casual mentions of financial help began. "Sam, you know so much about money stuff," she said over coffee one day. "How do people usually pay for weddings?" I explained about saving in advance, setting realistic budgets, and considering more affordable options. "But what if you want your dream wedding now?" she pressed. "Then you adjust your dreams to match your reality," I said gently. "Maybe choose a beautiful but less expensive venue, or wait another year to save up." Kristen's face fell. "But we already put down the deposit at Sunset Cliffs. And June is the perfect month for the color palette I want." I suggested she look into wedding loans, explaining the high interest rates and risks involved. I recommended scaling back some elements or finding creative alternatives. I even offered to help her create a realistic budget. "You just don't understand," she said finally. "This is the most important day of my life. I can't compromise." As the months passed, Kristen's Instagram became a showcase of wedding extravagance, custom-designed save-the-dates, meetings with high-end caterers, a designer wedding dress that made my stomach clench when I imagined the price tag. Yet whenever I cautiously asked about finances, she would give vague answers about working it out or change the subject entirely. Then came the night that changed everything. I was relaxing at home after a long day of client meetings when my doorbell rang insistently at 9:30 p.m. When I opened the door, Kristen stood there with mascara streaking down her cheeks, looking utterly distraught. "Kristen? What happened? Are you okay?" I ushered her inside, genuinely concerned. She collapsed onto my couch, sobbing incoherently about the wedding, the venue, and money. I brought her a glass of water and waited for her to calm down enough to explain. "The venue called today," she finally hiccuped. "They need the full payment in 2 weeks or we lose our date. And the caterer needs a 50% deposit. And the florist. And everything is falling apart." I sat beside her. "How much do you still need?" $60,000, she whispered. The number hit me like a physical blow. 60,000? "Kristen, that's not possible. Don't you and Jason have any savings?" She shook her head miserably. "Jason's investment didn't work out. And I had to cut back my hours at work to plan the wedding." "Sam, please." "I wouldn't ask if I wasn't desperate." "What exactly are you asking for?" I said, though I already knew the answer. "I need you to co-sign a loan. Jason and I tried to get one. But his credit isn't great right now because of his business startup costs, and I don't make enough on my own. But with your credit score and income, we'd be approved for sure." Every financial alarm bell in my brain started ringing simultaneously. As a financial advisor, I had seen countless lives ruined by co-signing loans for family members. I had counseled clients through the aftermath of such decisions. I knew better than anyone the risks involved. "Kristen, I can't do that. Co-signing means I'm legally responsible for the entire loan if you can't pay. It affects my credit, my ability to borrow in the future. It's too much risk." "It's not a risk," she insisted, her tears suddenly drying up. "Jason and I will make every payment. You won't have to pay anything. I promise. I just need your signature. If you can't qualify for the loan on your own." "That's the bank's way of saying you can't afford to repay it," I explained. "So you're saying I can't have my wedding? That I have to call everyone and cancel because my own sister won't help me?" Her voice rose with each word. "I'm saying you should have a wedding you can afford," I countered. "Or postpone until you can save more." Kristen stood up, her expression shifting from desperation to cold anger. "You've always been jealous of me. You can't stand to see me happy. You have perfect credit and a good job. And it would cost you nothing to help me. Nothing." She grabbed her purse and stormed toward the door. "Forget it. I'll figure something out without you." As she slammed the door behind her, I sank onto my couch with a sickening feeling that this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The phone calls started the next morning. First my mother, her voice tight with disappointment. "Samantha, Kristen told us what happened. I thought you would support your sister on the most important day of her life." I tried explaining the financial realities of co-signing a loan, but she cut me off. "It's just a signature, Samantha. You're not actually paying for anything. Why must you always overthink everything?" My father called that evening, his approach more direct. "Your mother and I have already given what we can. You're doing well for yourself. It's time you contributed to the family too." By the third day, I was dodging calls from both parents and Kristen. Then came the group text. "Family dinner Sunday at 6. Everyone must attend. No excuses." I knew exactly what was coming, but I went anyway, armed with facts and figures about co-sign loans gone wrong. I even printed articles about wedding loan horror stories to share with my family. None of it mattered. The dinner quickly devolved into an intervention with me as the target. "Samantha has always been the responsible one," my mother began, as if introducing me to the strangers at the table. "But sometimes responsibility can turn into selfishness." My father nodded gravely. "Family helps family. That's how we raised you girls." Kristen sat across from me, her eyes red-rimmed but her expression smug. Jason was beside her, his arm draped protectively around her shoulders. "We've already had to downgrade some of our plans," Kristen said, her voice quivering for effect. "The ice sculpture is cancelled. The custom cocktails too." "Such sacrifices," I muttered, earning a sharp look from my father. "Sam," Jason spoke up, leaning forward with his most charming smile. "I understand your concerns. But I promise, we're good for this loan. My app is in final development stages. I have meetings with investors next month. By the time the first payment is due, we'll be more than covered." I'd heard similar promises from clients who later called me in tears when reality didn't match their fantasies. Even if that's true, why not wait until after those meetings? If you're so confident, postpone the wedding until your finances are more stable. "Because we're in love," Kristen interjected. "And we've already put down non-refundable deposits. Everyone has booked flights. My dress is being altered." The pressure continued through dessert. By the time we reached coffee, my mother was teary-eyed, my father was stone-faced, and Kristen was alternating between silent treatment and passive-aggressive sighs. "I need time to think about this," I finally said, desperate to escape. "The bank appointment is Thursday," Kristen replied immediately. "We need your answer by tomorrow." The next day at work, I couldn't focus on my client meetings. During my lunch break, I called my friend Natalie, who had always been my voice of reason. "They're manipulating you," she said flatly after I explained the situation. "My cousin did this for her brother. Guess who's paying off a $30,000 boat loan now? Not her brother, who mysteriously lost his job the month after purchase." After work, I sought advice from Martin, my mentor at the firm. He had decades of experience in financial advising and had taken me under his wing when I first started. "Samantha," he said, shaking his head, "if a client came to you with this scenario, what would you tell them?" "Run. Run far away," I admitted. "Exactly. Mixing family and large loans is like mixing tequila and decisions. Nothing good comes from it." He leaned forward. "But I also understand family pressure. If you're considering this at all, protect yourself legally as much as possible." I spent that night weighing my options. The rational part of my brain screamed to refuse. But another part, the part that still craved family approval after all these years, whispered that maybe this once, things would be different. Maybe Kristen would keep her promise. Maybe saying no would permanently damage our already fragile relationship. By morning, I had developed a compromise. I would co-sign the loan, but with conditions. Significant, legally binding conditions. If Kristen refused these terms, then I would have my answer about her true intentions. I called her that morning. "I'll do it," I said before she could speak, "but I have non-negotiable terms." "Anything," she squealed. "Thank you, Sam. I knew you'd come through. First, I need to be present for the entire loan process and speak privately with the loan officer. Second, I want specific clauses added to the agreement about payment responsibility. Third, I need full transparency about wedding expenses and future payments." "Sure, whatever you need," she agreed quickly. Too quickly. "The appointment is tomorrow at 2 p.m. I'll text you the address." That night, I barely slept. I kept wondering if I was making a catastrophic mistake. But I also formulated my plan carefully, researching cosigner protection clauses and loan terms until well past midnight. The bank was a sleek, modern building downtown. Kristen and Jason were already waiting in the lobby when I arrived, both dressed impressively for the occasion. A loan officer named Amanda greeted us warmly and led us to her office. "Before we start," I said once we were seated, "I'd like to speak with Amanda privately for a few minutes." Kristen frowned. "Why? We're all in this together." "It's a condition of my agreement to co-sign," I reminded her. "Just 5 minutes." Reluctantly, Kristen and Jason stepped outside. Once the door closed, I quickly explained my situation to Amanda. "I need to know what protections are available for cosigners," I said. "And I have some specific requests for this loan agreement." Amanda listened carefully, nodding occasionally. "We can definitely add a co-borrower clause specifying that both parties are equally responsible for repayment. And yes, we can set up notifications to all parties if a payment is missed." I also want a clause stating that after 3 missed payments, collection efforts must be directed equally to both parties, I added. That's unusual, but not impossible, she said, making notes. Typically, cosigners are only contacted after primary borrowers have defaulted, but we can modify the terms. When Kristen and Jason returned, Amanda walked us through the loan details. $60,000 at 12% interest over 5 years. Monthly payments would be approximately $1,330. That's more than we thought, Kristen whispered to Jason, but quickly composed herself. But we can manage it. Right, honey? Jason nodded confidently. Absolutely. By next month, things will be looking very different financially for us. As we reached the signature portion, Amanda explained the additional clauses I had requested. This states that both parties are co-borrowers, not just primary borrower and cosigner, she explained. And this ensures that payment notifications and collection efforts are directed to both parties equally. Kristen glanced at me suspiciously. Why does that matter? We're making the payments anyway. It's just protection, I said smoothly. Standard procedure for these arrangements. She hesitated, then shrugged. Whatever makes you comfortable. One by one, we signed the documents. With each signature, I felt a mix of dread and strange relief. The plan was in motion. For better or worse, I was now legally tied to my sister's financial decisions. As we left the bank, Kristen hugged me tightly. Thank you, Sam. You've saved my wedding. I promise you won't regret this. Looking into her eyes, I desperately wanted to believe her. But something in her expression told me I should prepare for the worst. June arrived with perfect weather for Kristen's dream wedding. Sunset Cliffs Resort looked like something from a fairy tale. With its clifftop ceremony space overlooking the ocean and reception ballroom adorned with thousands of white roses and crystal chandeliers. I stood beside my sister as her maid of honor, wearing the $400 dress she had selected, holding the bouquet that cost more than my monthly utility bills. The ceremony was admittedly beautiful. Kristen looked radiant in her custom gown with its cathedral-length train. Jason appeared genuinely moved as she walked down the aisle. For a brief moment, I allowed myself to hope that perhaps they would mature into this commitment, that the loan hanging over our heads would be repaid as promised. The reception was a showcase of excess that made my financial advisor soul cringe. A 10-piece band, champagne fountains, a 5-tier cake, and party favors that included monogrammed crystal flutes for each guest. As I watched Kristen and Jason take their first dance, I calculated the cost of this single day against the $1,330 monthly payments they would need to make for the next 5 years. Isn't it magical? My mother sighed, appearing beside me with a glass of champagne in hand. It's certainly something. I replied diplomatically. I know you had your doubts, she continued, but look how happy they are. Sometimes you have to take financial risks for the important things in life. I nodded noncommittally, choosing not to engage in a debate about responsible financial planning at the wedding I had reluctantly helped finance. The newlyweds departed amid a shower of rose petals, off to their 3-week honeymoon in Bora Bora. Before leaving, Kristen hugged me tightly. Thank you for everything, Sam, she whispered. I'll never forget what you did for us. Those words would take on a very different meaning in the weeks to come. The first loan payment was due exactly 30 days after disbursement, which coincided with the middle of their honeymoon. I had marked the date in my calendar, setting a reminder to check that the payment had been made. When that day arrived, I logged into the loan account portal that I had access to as a co-borrower. No payment had been posted. I tried calling Kristen, but her phone went straight to voicemail. I told myself not to panic. They were on their honeymoon. International calling could be tricky. Perhaps they had set up automatic payments that were processing slowly. I would give it a few days before worrying. 3 days later, there was still no payment. I sent Kristen a text. Hey, just checking about the loan payment that was due Tuesday. Let me know if everything's set up. No response. A week later, I received an automated email from the bank. Your loan payment is now 7 days past due. Please make arrangements to bring your account current to avoid negative credit reporting. This time, I called Jason's phone. It rang several times before going to voicemail. I left a message trying to sound calm. Hi Jason, it's Samantha. Could you or Kristen please call me about the loan payment? It's overdue. And I'm getting notices. Another week passed with no contact. By now, I was checking my credit score obsessively, watching for the inevitable hit. I tried reaching my parents to see if they had heard from the newlyweds. Oh, they're still traveling, my mother said airily. They extended their trip to include Paris. Isn't that romantic? My stomach dropped. Extended their trip? Mom, they have financial obligations. Samantha, don't be such a worrier. They're young and in love. The money stuff can wait a little. 2 days later, I finally received a text from Kristen. Instead of an explanation or apology, it was a photo of her and Jason toasting champagne at a rooftop restaurant with the Eiffel Tower in the background. The caption read, "Living our best life. Thanks for the wedding gift, sis. Love you." I stared at the message in disbelief. Gift? We had never discussed the loan as a gift. I had signed legally binding documents making me responsible for $60,000. I called her immediately, my hands shaking with anger. Surprisingly, she answered, sounding relaxed and happy. Sam, did you get my picture? Isn't Paris amazing? Kristen, I said, struggling to keep my voice steady. The loan payment is 2 weeks late. When are you planning to make it? There was a pause, then a light laugh. Oh, that. Jason and I were talking, and we realized you never really expected us to pay that back, right? I mean, you know our financial situation. It was basically a wedding present. The casual way she said it, as if we were discussing a toaster or bed sheets, left me momentarily speechless. Kristen, it was never a gift. It's a loan that I co-signed. My name is on that loan. My credit score is already dropping because of the missed payment. Don't be so uptight, Sam, she sighed. You can afford it. You're always going on about your emergency fund and investment portfolio. Consider this an investment in your sister's happiness. Put Jason on the phone, I demanded. He's in the shower. Look, we'll talk about this when we get back next week. Don't stress so much, it's bad for your health. Kristen, you need to make this payment immediately. I'm not joking around. I have to go. Our dinner reservation is in 30 minutes. Love you. And she hung up. I sat in stunned silence, the reality of the situation crashing down on me. My own sister had manipulated me into financing her extravagant wedding and honeymoon with no intention of repaying the loan. And now my financial future, which I had carefully built over years of responsible decisions, was in jeopardy. When I called my parents to explain what had happened, their response was even more devastating. Samantha. My father said sternly, your sister is starting her new life. If you can help her do that, you should consider it a privilege. We've always known you were the financially stable one. That doesn't mean I should be taken advantage of. I protested. Nobody is taking advantage, my mother chimed in. Family helps family. Maybe you could think of someone besides yourself for once. The conversation ended with me feeling more alone than ever. My family had made it clear, Kristen's desires would always take precedence over my financial well-being. I was expected to sacrifice without complaint because I had been responsible enough to have something to sacrifice. The next day, I received a formal notice from the bank that the loan was now 15 days past due and would be reported to credit bureaus. My carefully maintained perfect credit score, which I had built since my first credit card at 18, was about to be tarnished because of my sister's selfishness. I had never felt so betrayed, so utterly alone. That night, I cried myself to sleep, wondering how I could have been so blind to what should have been obvious. In my family's eyes, I would always be the provider, never the one deserving of protection or consideration. But as I drifted off to sleep, I remembered something that gave me the smallest glimmer of hope. Those special clauses I had insisted on at the bank. The conversation with Amanda. The signatures on those specific lines of the contract. Maybe, just maybe, there was a way out of this nightmare that didn't end with me paying for my sister's wedding for the next 5 years. The impact of the late payment hit my credit score like a wrecking ball. 60 points gone overnight. As a financial advisor, I knew the long-term consequences better than most. higher interest rates on future loans, potential difficulty renting apartments, even possible impacts on job opportunities since many employers now checked credit as part of background screening. I made the first loan payment myself, withdrawing from my emergency fund to cover the $1,330. It felt like throwing money into a fire, but I couldn't risk further damage to my credit while I figured out my next steps. The professional embarrassment was almost worse than the financial strain. How could I advise clients on responsible financial planning when I had made such a catastrophic mistake myself? I found myself stumbling over words during client meetings, especially when the topic of family loans arose. "Everything okay, Samantha?" my boss Martin asked after I fumbled through a presentation. "You seem distracted lately." I considered lying, but Martin had been my mentor for years. If anyone would understand, it would be him. I co-signed a loan for my sister's wedding, I admitted. And now she's refusing to pay. I expected disappointment or judgment, but Martin's expression showed only compassion. "Family financial situations are always the hardest," he said. "Even financial advisors aren't immune to emotional decision-making when it comes to loved ones." His understanding brought tears to my eyes. "I should have known better," I whispered. "Maybe. But beating yourself up won't solve the problem. What's your plan?" Plan. The word triggered a memory of sitting in Amanda's office at the bank, insisting on those special clauses. I straightened up. Actually, I think I might have one. That afternoon, I called the bank and asked to speak with Amanda. Fortunately, she remembered me. "I need to discuss the co-borrower clause we added to the loan agreement," I explained. "Of course," she said. "Let me pull up the file." I waited anxiously as she reviewed the documents. "Yes. Here it is," she confirmed. "Both parties are designated as co-borrowers with equal responsibility for repayment. And there's the notification clause requiring both parties to be contacted regarding payment issues." "Has that been happening?" I asked. "Have you been contacting both of us?" "Let me check the contact log," she said. There was a pause. "It looks like the system has only been sending automated notices to the primary contact email, which is your sister's. That's not in accordance with the terms we agreed to." "And what about the clause regarding collection efforts after 3 missed payments?" "That states that after 3 consecutive missed payments, collection efforts must be directed equally to both parties," she read. "Which means calls, letters, and other collection activities would be directed to both you and your sister." "We're approaching the 3rd missed payment," I pointed out. "I made 1 payment myself, but the loan is still not current." "I see that," Amanda confirmed. "I'm going to update our system right now to ensure both parties receive all communications about this loan. And I'll make a note about the collection efforts clause to ensure it's enforced if the situation continues." For the first time in weeks, I felt a small sense of control returning. My sister might have assumed she could simply ignore her responsibility, leaving me to deal with the consequences. But she was about to discover that her actions had consequences too. After my call with Amanda, I made another difficult decision. I needed to set clear boundaries with my family, even if it meant temporary estrangement. I drafted a carefully worded email to my parents. "Mom and Dad, I love you both, but I cannot continue to be treated as Kristen's financial safety net. She has taken advantage of my goodwill, and your encouragement of her behavior has made the situation worse. I've spent years building financial stability through hard work and responsible choices. That doesn't make me an ATM for family members who refuse to do the same. Until Kristen takes responsibility for the loan she promised to repay, I need to step back from family gatherings and regular communication. This is not a decision I've made lightly, but it's necessary for my well-being." I hesitated before hitting send, knowing this email would likely trigger a family crisis. But after years of being the responsible one who got taken for granted, it was time to stand up for myself. I pressed send. The response was swift and predictable. My mother called immediately, alternating between tears and accusations. "How could you be so selfish?" she sobbed. "We're your family." "That's exactly the point, Mom," I replied, somehow maintaining my composure. "Family shouldn't exploit family. Kristen made promises she had no intention of keeping, and you and Dad enabled her. She's younger than you. She doesn't understand financial responsibility the way you do. She's 22 years old, Mom. Not 12. She understands exactly what she's doing. My father's response came via text. Your mother is devastated. I expected better from you. I didn't respond. Years of therapy had helped me recognize these tactics for what they were. Manipulation designed to make me resume my role as the family fixer. Instead, I focused on taking care of myself. The stress of the situation had taken a physical toll: insomnia, tension headaches, even a minor breakout of stress-induced eczema. I scheduled a massage, started daily meditation, and joined a support group for people dealing with difficult family dynamics. And I waited. The loan entered its third month of delinquency. I had made one payment, but the other two remained outstanding. According to the loan agreement, the bank would now begin equal collection efforts against both co-borrowers. Kristen and Jason had returned from their extended honeymoon weeks ago, posting lavish photos of their new apartment furnishings and dining experiences. Not once had either of them reached out about the loan. In their minds, the matter was settled. The loan was my problem now. But the special clause I had insisted on was about to change that equation dramatically. And despite everything, a small part of me felt sad about what was coming. Not because Kristen didn't deserve it, but because it represented the final fracturing of whatever relationship we might have had. Still, as I checked my calendar and realized the bank's collection department would be making their first calls tomorrow, I couldn't help but feel a certain grim satisfaction. Kristen had always skated through life without facing consequences. She was about to learn that the real world operated differently than our parents' house. The thought brought me no joy. But it did bring a sense of justice. Sometimes the hardest lessons are the most necessary ones. And Kristen was overdue for a lesson in responsibility. The call came on a Tuesday morning. Exactly as I had anticipated. I was in my office reviewing a client's retirement portfolio when my cell phone lit up with Kristen's name. After weeks of silence, her sudden call could only mean one thing: the bank had finally contacted her directly. I let it ring through to voicemail, then listened to the message she left. Sam, what the hell? Some woman from the bank just called me about missed loan payments and threatened to send the account to collections. Call me back immediately. Her voice contained no apology, only indignation and surprise. I waited an hour before returning her call, using the time to center myself and prepare for the conversation ahead. What is going on? She demanded when she picked up. Why is the bank harassing me? They're not harassing you, Kristen. They're contacting you about a loan you haven't been paying. But that's your problem. You co-signed. Actually, if you had bothered to read the loan agreement, you'd know that we're both co-borrowers with equal responsibility. The bank is required to pursue both of us for payment. There was a moment of stunned silence. You tricked me, she finally said, her voice low and accusatory. No, Kristen. I protected myself from exactly the scenario that's playing out. You promised to make the payments. You had no intention of keeping that promise. Who exactly tricked whom? We can't afford those payments right now. Jason's investors fell through. And I had to cut back my hours because of wedding planning and the honeymoon. That sounds like something you should have considered before taking out a $60,000 loan. So, what am I supposed to do? She cried. They said they'll report this to the credit bureaus. They mentioned wage garnishment. The same things they've been threatening me with for months. While you were posting champagne selfies from Paris, I replied evenly. You have two options. Start making payments as you promised, or face the consequences of defaulting on a major loan. Can't you help us out? Just until Jason's new business idea gets funding. The familiar request made me laugh bitterly. I already helped you out, Kristen. I co-signed a loan that funded your dream wedding and honeymoon. You repaid me by calling it a gift and sticking me with the bill. Mom and Dad will be so upset when they hear how you're treating me, she threatened. They're already upset with me for setting boundaries. Another disappointment won't make much difference. Before hanging up, I added, the bank will continue contacting you about this loan. That's not something I can control now, even if I wanted to. The agreement we signed makes us equally responsible. Less than 15 minutes later, my phone exploded with texts and calls from my parents. As expected, they had immediately taken Kristen's side. "Your sister is crying her eyes out," my mother's voicemail said. "How could you set her up like this? She's just starting her married life." My father's message was more direct. "Fix this, Samantha. Whatever you did with the bank, undo it. Family doesn't do this to family." I didn't respond to either message. There was nothing to fix, nothing to undo. The loan agreement was legally binding, and the bank was simply following the terms we had all agreed to. Over the next few days, the reality of the situation began to sink in for Kristen and Jason. The bank's collection department was persistent, calling daily and sending formal notices. As co-borrowers, they were equally liable for the full amount, and the bank made it clear that their credit would suffer significantly if they continued to ignore their obligation. A week after the initial call, Kristen texted me again. "We're selling some of our wedding gifts to make a payment. Happy now." I resisted the urge to point out that she could have sold those gifts before traveling to Paris. Instead, I simply replied, "It's not about making me happy. It's about honoring your commitments." Soon after, I noticed a payment had been applied to the loan account. Not the full amount due, but a start. The next week, another partial payment appeared. Kristen and Jason were scrambling to avoid further credit damage, selling luxury items from their registry and honeymoon souvenirs to cover the payments. Jason's leased BMW was replaced by a used Honda, not unlike my own. Their expensive apartment was swapped for a more modest one. The constant stream of restaurant check-ins on social media ceased abruptly. My parents' approach shifted from anger to pleading. "Samantha, can you help them just a little?" my mother asked during one of her daily calls. "They're really struggling. They're experiencing the natural consequences of their choices," I replied. "This is what growing up looks like." "But they're family," she insisted. "Yes, they are. And family should treat each other with respect and honesty." Kristen did neither. The family dynamics were shifting in ways I had never anticipated. Extended family members began reaching out to me privately, many expressing support after hearing both sides of the story. "Kristen has been borrowing money from everyone for years," my cousin Ellie confided. "No one ever expected to be paid back. We just accepted it as Kristen being Kristen. Maybe this will finally change that pattern." My Aunt Linda, my father's sister, was even more direct. "Your parents did Kristen no favors by bailing her out of every mess. What you're doing is tough love, but it's love nonetheless." As the weeks passed, Kristen and Jason continued making payments, though rarely the full amount and never on time. Their credit scores suffered, but not as dramatically as they would have with a complete default. They were learning, albeit reluctantly, that financial obligations couldn't simply be wished away. 3 months after the bank began collection efforts, I received a text from Kristen that surprised me. "I need advice on budgeting. Can we talk?" It wasn't an apology, but it was an acknowledgement that she needed to change. That evening, we had our first civil conversation in months. Kristen admitted that she and Jason had been living far beyond their means, fueled by credit cards and wishful thinking about future income. "Jason's startup ideas keep failing," she confessed. "And I've realized I need a better job if we're ever going to get ahead of this debt." I didn't say "I told you so," though the words burned on my tongue. Instead, I offered practical advice about budgeting, finding better employment, and gradually rebuilding credit. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a step toward a new kind of relationship. One built on reality rather than fantasy. The satisfaction I felt wasn't about seeing my sister suffer. It was about watching her finally begin to grow up. The path she and Jason had been on would have led to financial ruin, with increasingly desperate attempts to maintain appearances while drowning in debt. This painful lesson, while expensive for all of us, had potentially saved them from a much worse fate. And for me, there was vindication in standing my ground. For the first time in my life, I had refused to be the family scapegoat, the responsible one who cleaned up everyone else's messes. The boundaries I had set came at a high cost, both financially and emotionally. But they were necessary for my own well-being and, ultimately, for Kristen's growth. The loan was still far from paid off, and our family relationships remained strained. But a new foundation was being built, brick by painful brick. And that, I realized, might be worth more than the $60,000 that had nearly destroyed us. 6 months after the bank began contacting Kristen and Jason about the loan, a tentative new normal had emerged in our family. The loan payments were now being made somewhat regularly, though often a few days late. My credit score had begun the slow climb back toward its former excellent standing, though the damage would take years to fully repair. More significantly, I had maintained my boundaries with my family. The weekly dinners and constant text chains had been replaced by occasional, more meaningful interactions. When I did speak with my parents or Kristen, it was because I chose to, not because I felt obligated or was responding to a crisis. Therapy had been instrumental in helping me process the complex emotions around the experience. My therapist, Dr. Rachel, helped me understand that my family had established unhealthy patterns long ago, with me cast in the role of problem solver and Kristen as the eternal child. Your refusal to continue in that role has disrupted the entire family system, Dr. Rachel explained. That's why there was such strong pushback. You weren't just refusing alone. You were challenging their understanding of who you are within the family. I had also found unexpected support through a financial wellness group I joined, where other people shared stories of family financial entanglements gone wrong. It was both validating and heartbreaking to realize how common these situations were. Family and money mix about as well as bleach and ammonia, one group member joked darkly. Both create toxic fumes that can suffocate you. Perhaps the most surprising development came when Kristen asked to meet for coffee one rainy Tuesday afternoon. She arrived on time, a small miracle in itself. And without the designer handbag and expensive highlights that had once been her signature. I got a promotion, she announced without preamble, sliding into the seat across from me. Assistant manager. It comes with a significant raise. That's great, I said, genuinely pleased for her. Congratulations. She fidgeted with her coffee cup. I wanted you to know that I'm putting half of every paycheck toward the loan now. Jason too, from his new job. Jason had finally abandoned his entrepreneurial dreams for a steady position in sales. A much better fit for his personality and skills. We should have the loan paid off in 3 years instead of 5, she continued. Assuming we keep getting raises and bonuses. That's really responsible planning, I said carefully, not wanting to sound condescending. Kristen looked up, meeting my eyes directly. I know I haven't said it, but I'm sorry, Sam. What I did was wrong. I took advantage of you because I knew you would bail me out. You always did. The apology, so long awaited, caught me off guard. I had prepared myself for continued justifications or excuses, not this straightforward acknowledgement. I appreciate that, I said finally. It means a lot to hear you say it. I've been thinking about why I did it, she continued, surprising me further. I think I was jealous of you. You always had everything together while I was a mess. The wedding was my chance to shine, to have something more impressive than you had. It was stupid and childish. We were set up to compete from the beginning, I said. Sharing an insight from therapy. Mom and Dad created different expectations for each of us. You were the special one who needed protecting, and I was the strong one who could handle anything. She nodded slowly. They're having a hard time adjusting to the new me. Mom keeps trying to give us money, even though we've told her we're managing on our own now. They're stuck in the old patterns too, I agreed. It will take time for all of us to find a healthier way to relate to each other. Our conversation wasn't a magical fix for years of dysfunction, but it was a start. As we parted ways, Kristen hesitated, then gave me a quick hug. Thank you for forcing me to grow up, she whispered. I needed it more than I knew. My parents were slower to come around. Their identity as parents was deeply tied to being needed, to solving problems for their children, especially Kristen. My mother still occasionally slipped into old habits, making comments about how I should help out your sister. She's really trying now. But there were signs of progress there too. My father called one evening, his voice uncharacteristically reflective. I've been thinking about what you said about enabling Kristen, he began. I think your mother and I did you both a disservice. We expected too much from you and too little from her. It wasn't quite an apology, but from my stoic father, it was significant. "I appreciate you saying that, Dad," I replied. "I think we all did the best we could with what we knew at the time." "Still, I'm proud of how you handled this situation," he added. "It couldn't have been easy to stand your ground when we were all against you." His words healed something in me that I hadn't realized was still broken. A childlike need for parental approval that apparently never fully disappears, even in adulthood. As the months passed, our family began tentatively rebuilding relationships on a more equal footing. Holiday gatherings were smaller and less fraught with tension. Conversations became more authentic, less burdened by unspoken expectations and resentments. The loan that had nearly destroyed us was slowly becoming just a loan, not a symbol of betrayal or manipulation or family dysfunction. Each payment Kristen and Jason made represented not just financial responsibility, but a step toward repairing trust. At work, I found myself becoming a more empathetic advisor to clients dealing with family financial pressures. My personal experience had given me insights no textbook could provide. I created a workshop called Boundaries, Not Bailouts that became unexpectedly popular, helping others navigate the treacherous intersection of family and finances. The experience had changed me in fundamental ways. I had learned that saying no to those you love can sometimes be the most loving action. That establishing boundaries isn't selfish, but essential for healthy relationships. That even financial advisors can make emotionally driven money mistakes, and that recovering from those mistakes is possible. Most importantly, I had discovered my own worth beyond being the reliable one, the fixer, the responsible sister. I was Samantha, a complete person with the right to protect my own interests and the strength to withstand disapproval from those I loved. Looking back, the $60,000 loan had been an expensive lesson, but perhaps a necessary one. It had forced uncomfortable truths into the open and catalyzed changes that might otherwise have taken decades or never happened at all. In the painful aftermath, something new and healthier had emerged from the ashes of old patterns and expectations. Family relationships are complex, woven from threads of love, obligation, history, and sometimes dysfunction. The loan that had threatened to unravel our family had, ironically, led to a reweaving of those relationships into something stronger and more authentic than before. Had you ever had to stand your ground with family over financial matters? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this story of financial boundaries and family drama resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to my channel for more real-life experiences. Remember, sometimes the hardest thing and the right thing are the same. Thank you for listening to my story, and may you find the courage to set healthy boundaries in your own relationships.